Finally, you are going to know the truth about the origin of black people. I am going to tell you what you have never heard before, so do well to comment below after the end of this video. This is a story that has traveled through generations, told by elders, written down by priests, whispered by grandmothers to grandchildren long after the fires burned low. It is the story of where humanity began and how one family, born from one man, spread out and became many nations, many colors, many tongues, many ways of life. Some call it legend, some call it scripture, some call it memory dressed up as myth, but every people on this earth, somewhere in their oldest stories, tells some version of this same tale. So let's tell it properly. Let's tell it the way it was meant to be told, slow, honest, and true to what has been passed down. It starts with Adam. The story says Adam was formed from the earth itself, from soil, from clay, from dust taken from the ground he would walk on. And here's something worth sitting with. Many of the oldest traditions, especially those kept alive in parts of Africa and the Middle East, describe Adam as dark-skinned, not by accident, but because the earth he came from was dark, rich, red-brown soil, the same soil found across the Nile Valley and into the heart of Africa. This is not something new invented today. This idea is ancient. It shows up in old Ethiopian texts, in Jewish folklore, in the way certain African communities have always told this story among themselves, long before it was written in the books most people read today. So picture that, the first man walking the earth with skin the color of the ground beneath his feet, dark, grounded, connected to the very soil he was pulled from. From Adam came generations. Families grew, spread, and multiplied, and through many, many years, one name rises above the noise: Noah. Noah lived in a time the story describes as deeply troubled. People had turned wild, cruel, forgetful of where they came from and who made them. But Noah stood apart. He kept his heart in the right place. He remembered. And because of that, when the flood came, the great flood that the story says swallowed the whole earth, Noah and his family were the ones who survived it. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because this is where it explains something most people never stop to think about. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And from these 3 sons came every nation, every tribe, every people that exists on earth today. Every single one of us, according to this story, traces back to one of these 3 men. Let's slow down and take each one, because each one carries a piece of the puzzle. Shem is the oldest son. His name in the old language means name or renown. From Shem came the peoples who would settle across parts of the Middle East and stretching further into Asia. The story ties Shem to the ancestors of the Hebrews, the Assyrians, the Arameans, and other peoples of that region. If you've ever heard the word Semitic used to describe languages like Hebrew or Arabic, that word comes directly from Shem's name. His descendants carried forward a particular way of speaking, a particular way of worshiping, and their bloodline is remembered as one that held on to certain sacred traditions passed down from Noah himself. Then there's Ham. Ham is the son most connected in these old accounts to Africa. His name itself in the old Hebrew tongue is believed by many scholars and storytellers to mean hot or burnt or dark. Some old African and Middle Eastern traditions directly connect this name to the sun-scorched lands south of Noah's original home and to the peoples who settled there, people whose skin deepened under generations of strong sun, people who built some of the earliest and greatest civilizations the world has ever known. Ham had sons of his own: Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. And this is where things get really important, because these 4 names are the roots of entire nations. Cush became the ancestor of the Cushites, the people of ancient Nubia, the kingdom that rose along the Nile just south of Egypt. Cush's descendants built one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in human history, a civilization with its own pyramids, some historians say even more pyramids than Egypt, its own kings, its own written language, and its own gold that made it famous across the ancient world. Mizraim became the ancestor of the Egyptians. In fact, to this day, in the Hebrew language, Egypt is still called Mizraim. Every time that word is spoken, it's a callback to this very story, a reminder that Egypt's roots trace directly to Ham's son. Phut is remembered as the ancestor of peoples who settled in parts of North Africa, in the lands we now call Libya and areas nearby. Some old writings connect Phut's descendants to skilled warriors and hunters, people known for their strength and their bows. And Canaan, the last son, became the ancestor of the Canaanites, the people who settled the lands that would later be called Israel and the surrounding regions. Their story is a little more complicated, tangled up in later conflicts recorded in the same old texts, but their bloodline traces just the same, straight back to Ham. So when you look at Ham's descendants as a whole, you're looking at the roots of ancient Nubia, ancient Egypt, and large parts of North Africa. You're looking at the roots of a continent that gave the world its earliest kingdoms, its earliest writing systems, and some of its earliest advanced building, farming, and trading. This is why so many people, when they tell this story today, connect Ham directly to the origin of black African peoples, not as an insult, not as something lesser, but as the root of nations that shaped the ancient world in ways still felt today. Now let's turn to the third son, Japheth. Japheth's name is believed to mean expansion or to enlarge. And true to that meaning, his descendants are remembered as the ones who spread out the furthest, settling across what we now call Europe and stretching into parts of Asia as well. From Japheth came the ancestors of the Greeks through his son Javan. From Japheth came the ancestors of peoples who settled in what is now Russia, Turkey, and across into the far reaches of Europe. His descendants are remembered as travelers, expanders, people who kept moving outward, generation after generation, spreading further from where the family first began.
So here you have it, laid out plainly. 3 brothers, 3 different directions, 3 different climates that shaped 3 very different peoples over many, many generations. But let's slow down here, because this is the part most people skip past too quickly. And it's the part that actually explains everything. These 3 sons didn't wake up one morning looking different from each other. That's not how any of this works, and that's not what the story is really saying either. What happened is this. As their children and their children's children and generations after that moved into different lands, different climates, different environments, their bodies changed slowly over an incredibly long stretch of time. Thousands of years, not overnight, not in one lifetime, not even in 10 lifetimes, but across so many generations that the changes became permanent, passed down through the blood, written into the very skin. Think about it like this. If your family moved to a place with a burning hot sun beating down every single day, generation after generation, your skin would need more protection from that sun. Over thousands of years, that need shapes the body itself. Darker skin was not a flaw, it was armor. It was the Earth's way of protecting the people who stayed closest to the strongest sun, the descendants of Ham, who settled deep into Africa and the hottest parts of the ancient world. Now think about the opposite. If a family moved further and further away from the equator into colder lands with weaker sun, thousands of years of that different environment would shape the body differently too. Lighter skin allowed those bodies to soak up whatever weak sunlight they could get, because the body still needs sunlight to survive and stay strong. This is what happened, slowly, to many of Japheth's descendants as they expanded into Europe and into the colder regions of Asia. And Shem's line, settling in the regions in between, in the Middle East, carried features that were shaped by that in-between climate too. Neither the deepest tones of those who stayed closest to the equator, nor the lightest tones of those who traveled furthest into the cold. This is the real answer to a question people argue about constantly, without ever slowing down to actually understand it. Skin color was never about worth. It was never about one brother being better than another. It was about land. It was about sun. It was about thousands of years of the human body adjusting itself to survive in whatever corner of the earth that particular family ended up calling home. And here's something that deserves to be said clearly, without any confusion. Every single person alive today, no matter their skin color, no matter their language, no matter their homeland, comes from this same root. One father, one family, three brothers who each carried a piece of that same first man forward into new lands. Nobody is separate from this story. Everybody is written into it. Now, let's talk about what happened after this spreading out, because the story doesn't stop with just three brothers going three separate ways. As Ham, Shem, and Japheth's descendants grew into full nations, something else happened. Language changed. What started as one shared way of speaking split apart into many different tongues, spoken across many different lands. And as language changed, culture changed with it. The way people prayed changed. The way people built their homes changed. The way people organized their families, their kings, their laws. All of it began shifting, family by family, generation by generation. This is how you get such a wide spread of nations from what the story insists was one single starting point. Ham's line didn't just become one African people. It became the Cushites of Nubia with their own kings and pyramids. It became the Egyptians with their own gods and their own written language carved into stone. It became the peoples of Libya with their own way of hunting and fighting. Each branch took root in its own soil and grew into something distinct, even while carrying that same original bloodline underneath it all. The same happened with Shem's line, splitting into the ancestors of different peoples across the Middle East, each developing their own customs, even while sharing that same root language family that still echoes today in Hebrew and Arabic. And the same happened with Japheth's line, spreading across Europe and into Asia, splitting into the ancestors of the Greeks and many other peoples who would go on to build their own kingdoms, their own philosophies, their own ways of understanding the world. So when someone tells you that all people came from one family and then asks how that one family became so many different peoples with so many different appearances, this is your answer. It wasn't magic. It wasn't an accident. It was climate. It was time. It was thousands of years of families settling into land, adjusting that land, and passing those adjustments down through their children, generation after generation, until those small changes became permanent parts of who they were. Now here's something worth thinking about carefully. Ham's story and the story of his descendants, especially those who settled deep into Africa, deserves far more respect than it usually gets. Because look at what actually came from that bloodline. Nubia, a kingdom so powerful it ruled over Egypt itself during certain periods, with kings so respected they're remembered even in Egyptian history as pharaohs in their own right. Egypt itself, one of the greatest civilizations to ever exist, with buildings still standing today after thousands of years, buildings so precise, so massive, so carefully built that people still study them trying to understand exactly how they were made. This is Ham's legacy. This is the legacy carried forward by his descendants, the people whose skin deepened under the strongest sun on earth, the people who many traditions directly point to as the root of Black African civilization. Their darker skin wasn't a mark of anything lesser. It was, if anything, a mark of endurance, a mark of a people who thrived in conditions that would break weaker bodies, a mark of survival passed down through thousands of years of unbroken bloodline. And this is why this story matters so much, and why it's been told, retold, and passed down through so many generations across so many different cultures. Because it answers a question that people have carried in their hearts forever. Where did we come from? Why do we look different from each other? Why do we speak different languages, worship in different ways, build our homes differently, cook our food differently? The answer this story gives is simple, and honestly, it's kind of beautiful when you really sit with it. We came from the same root. We spread out across the same earth, and the earth itself, through its sun, its soil, its climate, shaped us differently over thousands of years, giving each branch of that one family its own unique way of surviving and thriving wherever they landed. Shem's line held on to the Middle Lands, carrying forward certain traditions and a certain way of speaking that still echoes today in Hebrew and Arabic. Ham's line pushed deep into Africa, building kingdoms that shaped the ancient world and leaving behind wonders still standing after thousands of years. Japheth's line expanded outward into Europe and beyond, spreading across colder lands and building their own version of civilization far from where the story began. 3 brothers, 3 directions, 1 origin. And every person listening to this right now, no matter where your own family history eventually leads, no matter your own skin color, your own language, your own homeland, this story insists that all of it traces back to that same starting point. 1 family, 1 root, spread across the earth over thousands of years until it became every nation, every people, every color we see today. This story has been carried by voices across generations, told around fires, written into old scrolls, passed from elder to child for longer than most of us can even imagine. And now it's been passed to you. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about where we all come from and how we all connect back to the same root despite how different we look today, let me know in the comments below. Tell me what part of this stood out to you the most. And if you want more stories like this, more truths pulled from old traditions and passed down history, make sure you subscribe because there's so much more of this ancient story still waiting to be told.